Hey y'all, Scott here. Say, do you remember when I took a look at the first Sonic the Hedgehog game and realized that it's filled with design flaws and problems? Yep, the fans loved me for saying that. On to Sonic 2! Sonic the Hedgehog 1, the worst first entry in the Sonic the Hedgehog series out there. The more I look back at this one, the more I dislike it. It's not terrible, but its flaws become more and more apparent with time. Zones go on for far too long, level design can be unfair, cheap, and boring at times, and the pacing of the game is just all over the place. Half of the zones are just a slog to go through, and the other half that I think are at the very least decent, my foot isn't really thumping to replay them. Sonic 1 is at its best in the first stage. Like, if I ever want to go through the game again, I'll play through Green Hill Zone. Yep, that's the end of that thought. But who am I kidding? I'll still keep rebuying this game over and over again. I have a soft spot for this one. It was the first game I ever owned. I've already droned on and on about this, but I got a Sega Genesis and a copy of Sonic 1 as a hand-me-down from one of my cousins. A few months later, my parents and I were driving home and we stopped by this old record store that also sold retro games. They let me pick out 2 new games for my Genesis, so I chose Miss Pac-Man and Sonic 2, while also considering picking up Pac-Man 2: The New Adventures, but I'm still alive, so you know that didn't happen. I have just as much nostalgia for Sonic 2 as I did with 1, and a very similar play history as well. I can never get past the second zone in the game. Now with the second zone in Sonic 1, Marble Zone, I think that's completely understandable for a 6-year-old to have trouble getting past that level. Chemical Plant in Sonic 2, yeah, I have no excuse for that one. I've continued to dabble in Sonic 2 over the years, owning it on a good handful of collections. Since I've taken a look back at the first game, I think it's only fair to do the deed with the sequel too. Before we get into the game itself, let's start off with the history of it. Sonic the Hedgehog was a massive success and did everything Sega intended it to do. Giving Sega an iconic mascot, establishing a killer app for the Genesis, creating a character that could rival Nintendo's Mario, Sonic did all of this. So obviously, what better game to follow up Sonic the Hedgehog with than a sequel to Sonic the Hedgehog? Sonic 2 was thrown into development around November of 1991 and was headed by an American branch of Sega, the Sega Technical Institute. Sonic's original creator Yuji Naka was fed up with Sega of Japan, quit, and was then later convinced by Mark Cerny, who nowadays is known for his work at Sony, to work at STI. So Yuji Naka quit Sega to work for Sega. Various other Japanese Sega employees moved to America to help develop the game, which led to some communication difficulties due to, you know, different languages. While Sonic 2 had a year development time until it released, a treasure trove of levels were cut from the final game, some never leaving the concept stage, some programmed into the game yet never completed. The most famous of the bunch has to be Hidden Palace Zone, which could be accessed through cheat devices, albeit in a state where you wouldn't trust it in a dark alley. Other cut stages include Wood Zone, Dust Hill Zone, and Genocide City Zone. No wonder Sega said Nintendo's for pussies. The game launched on November 24th, 1992, a day Sega called Sonic Tuesday. This was actually a fairly substantial deal in retrospect, simply due to the fact that Sega went for a global release of the game, with it releasing the same day in North America and Europe. Even though Sega of Japan decided to release the game a couple days early on the 21st. Regardless, it was still a big deal at the time. But the release was also monumental due to the fact that the game released on a Tuesday. This inspired other publishers to do the same, which is why most video games since have released on a contender for the top 7 days of the week list I'm working on. Now, onto my thoughts, and I will say this, Sonic the Hedgehog 2 is my favorite sequel to Sonic the Hedgehog. The intro is eerily similar to the first game, the same Sega startup sound, except now appearing after 2 consecutive slow the f downs. Title screen has the same music as the first game, the same winged metal, the same logo, but now with a new background, less sass, and somebody new to haze. The new face in town is Miles Prower, or as sensible people call him, Tails. Having 2 tails that allow him to fly, he tags alongside you in the game, but doesn't add a whole lot other than, damn it! To be fair, he can kill some enemies, grab some rings, and his addition makes the overall journey feel more fun, like you're doing it all with a pal. In fact, you can actually play with a pal, as Tails can be controlled by a second player, albeit with less functionality than Sonic and infinite lives. There's also a full competitive 2-player split-screen mode for a few select levels, which, well, it could have been worse. However, Tails and multiplayer are just the beginning of what Sonic 2 introduces. Sonic 2 still plays almost identically to the first game though. You play as this and try to make your way there. Collecting rings, which still act as your health bar fundamentally, defeating enemies by hitting them in your ball state, and having the same power-ups. This is definitely as Sonic as a Hedgehog can get. But now, things are way faster. Like Sonic 1 was faster than your average platformer at the time, Sonic 2 says, this guy right? And just obliterates it. Like Sonic gives a hearty this screen because sometimes it can't even keep up with him. It's insane. Now the increased speed is partly due to a new move you can perform, the spin dash. Crouch down, exclaim death to thumbs, and haha! An instant burst of speed. This is such an awesome addition. It definitely helps with Sonic's level design, as many slopes you have to traverse require you to be at a relatively high speed. So instead of walking all the way over here, start running and maintaining top speed to get higher, you can just... In Sonic 1, if you had 50 plus rings by the end of Act 1 or 2 of a zone, you had a chance to hop into a big ring for a shot at a special stage. If you can survive a migraine, you can survive this and win one of 6 Chaos Emeralds, which if you collect all of them, you got a nice pat on the back in the form of flowers in the ending. Oh, come on. Sonic 2 has a bit of a different format to its special stages. If you have 50 rings by the time you cross a checkpoint, stars appear, and you know what that means. Now this is something to write home about. I have so many memories of these special stages. I mean, come on, they're 3D. That's cool. Nowadays I dread playing these things, but hey, compared to the other games at the time and the special stages in Sonic 1, these things were impressive. They were something to put on the fridge. Now of course, disregarding the 3D aspect of these stages that made them the talk of the town, these blow. They require so much memorization. The fake 3D makes the perspective difficult to judge at times, and fucking tails. At least now you can get multiple Chaos Emeralds per stage with the multitude of checkpoints scattered about, so you can collect all of them fairly early on. There are now 7 emeralds to get, and nabbing them all nets you a one-way ticket to ultimate power. Super Sonic. Basically almost pure invincibility, as long as you still got rings. And that's what Sonic 2 introduced to the franchise, but do these things overall make the experience better? Does Sonic 2 completely trounce the original in every way? Fucking yeah. It improves on everything from 1. I legitimately don't know of anything that 1 does better than 2. The first stage, Emerald Hill Zone, is Green Hill Zone again, but somebody had a wild night with a 152 box of Crayolas. The sheer amount of color in this zone is amazing. Everything just pops, and it's just so nice to look at. A beautiful amount of speed, platforming, alternate paths, it's fantastic fun. Zones now only feature 2 acts rather than 3, which is a godsend. Each act is more fleshed out, and ending it at 2 keeps the zones from becoming stale. They end at just the right moment. The next level, Chemical Plant, spits in the face of everything Sonic 1's second level ever aspired to be. This one keeps on keeping on. It doesn't take away your speed, yet it's obviously more difficult than the first stage. Ladies and gentlemen, here we are at the section Scott couldn't get through as a kid. I never got to the boss back in the day, but now when I do, happy No Floor Day, everybody! Aquatic Ruin Zone is the third area and is naturally water-based. A skilled player can go through the entire stage without even touching the water. Well, that's one way to realize my worth. God, the water in this stage is dreadful. Just like in Sonic 1, you are so slow. Also, anybody else find the parallax scrolling in this stage to just be weird? Like, this just doesn't look right. Casino Night Zone is the big debut of Sonic's favorite pastime, debt. It's a really fun level, but nowhere near my favorite though. I feel it's a bit overrated even. It's just so much of the zone feels the same to me. We get a pinball section, these springs, the slot machine, repeat a few times until the act is over. Casino Night is still great fun, just not one of my favorites. Hilltop brings things back down to a more traditional feeling level. Nothing crazy interesting to be honest. Following that is Mystic Cave Zone, home to a pit that is just spikes that you can't escape from. This is on somebody's resume. Oil Ocean. My cup of tea. I don't know, there's just something unappealing about this to me. I'm not a fan of plain Jane desert levels, and Oil Ocean invokes the feeling of them without being, you know, a desert level. It's hard to describe. Mudtropolis Zone, also known as... This isn't even the last zone, it's the last traditional zone, I guess, but it goes on for 3 acts, each longer than the last. This stage is filled to the brim with garbage. For example, this, that, and f***. These wall C stars are the worst. They shoot out projectiles if you get too close to them, and when you're going up these gear lift things, they always love to shoot them off, or sometimes not just for kicks. And with that, here's a Scott questions Sonic 2's game design moment. So you have to run on these gears to make them go up. The first time we're greeted to them, a thing of spikes are at the very top. The next time we have to deal with them, there are no spikes. Why is it more dangerous the first time? I know a thing or two about game design. I've watched 4 videos on YouTube about it, so I know it's best to introduce something in a safer area and then rev things up later down the line with things like this. Sky Chase Zone sees us on Tails' plane and we have full control over it, but not have full control over it at the same time. Like, we can move the plane wherever we want, however, we have to move Sonic around on the plane to control it, so there's like a second or two where if you want to move to the right of the screen, Sonic has to walk over to the far right of the plane. It's just no fun to control, to be honest. Wing Fortress Zone takes place immediately after Sky Chase, and we start end. How was I supposed to know this wasn't just a cutscene and I actually had to jump off? This isn't the time to be pulling this kind of garbage. We're at the very end of the game. The stage makes me wake up in a cold sweat while I'm playing somehow. Every step you take in this stage feels like it'll be your last. Like, we have to jump onto these bars and jump off, and am I the only one who thought there is no way I can make that jump from this? Also, what the hell? Alright, we go into space, the Death Egg Zone is all we have left, and there are no rings on this stage. I think this decision is why Sega Technical Institute doesn't make games anymore and probably just caters grad parties now. We have to deal with this silver robotic Sonic, which isn't super easy, but definitely doable. Well then, onto the Death Egg robot. This final boss is nerve-wracking. Not only did we have to survive the first phase, but we still have no rings. Whether you successfully hit the robot or it hits you just seems a little random sometimes. Like, the hit detection just seems wonky here. Alright, we save the day, blam credits. That's Sonic 2, and I know I ragged on it a bit there near the end, but don't take that as I dislike this game. My main problem gameplay-wise is that it does retain a fair amount of garbage from Sonic 1. You know, the traps that you can't really see coming, some trial and error, that kind of stuff. It's nowhere near as bad as 1, but it still has a good chunk of it from time to time. Like, this final boss is just a little too Sonic 1E for its own good. However, I'd say the pros easily outweigh the cons. The level design can be so much fun, it's leagues faster, it looks so much better, the music. Oh, the music! This soundtrack is phenomenal, every track is fantastic. The box art was always a favorite of mine. I don't know if it's actually objectively good or bad, but I still love it regardless. The game may have some issues, but the overall experience, in my opinion, is great. Sonic 2 is truly where the series started. It fixed loads of Sonic 1's problems, introduced a handful of series staples, and is just a fun game overall, which is all you really need. I own this game on so many different platforms. Much like the first game, I own that sucker on a freaky iPod Nano. Nowadays, honestly, it doesn't really matter what version of the game you play, except I will say the mobile phone version of Sonic 2 is by far the most definitive. It's in widescreen, you can play as Knuckles, they even made the Lost Stage Hidden Palace Zone playable. That's amazing! It's just a shame it's only on phones. Sega, do us all a favor and pop this version of Sonic 2 on consoles and PC, please and thank you. Yeah, Sonic 2 is really where the series started to get good in my opinion, and after seeing how it set the standard for video games released on a Tuesday, it made me want to do something just as monumental as that was. How about I'll go the rest of my life without verbs? From here on out, I will never use a verb. Damn it!